Welcome to the Holidays to Switzerland podcast. If you're planning a trip to Switzerland, this is the podcast for you. I'm your host, Carolyn Schonefinger, the founder of holidaystoSwitzerland.com. And in each episode, my expert guests and I share practical tips to help you plan your dream trip to Switzerland. You'll get helpful advice about travelling around Switzerland and hear about the most popular destinations, as well as some hidden gems. And we'll introduce you to plenty of wonderful experiences that you can enjoy as part of your Swiss vacation. Each episode is packed with expert tips, itinerary ideas, and inspiration to help make your Swiss vacation planning easy. So let's dive in. Grüezi, welcome to this week's episode. I think it's fair to say that most folks who are planning their first visit to Switzerland will include a stay in the Jungfrau Region in their itinerary. This is a stunningly beautiful and quite famous part of Switzerland, so it's not surprising that it's one of the most visited regions in the country. But having added the Jungfrau Region to their travel plans, deciding which of the towns or villages they should base themselves in can be overwhelming to many people. So who better then to tell us about the differences between the main towns and villages in the region than a local? I've invited Wengen-based James Wilson back to the podcast to give us a deep dive into what services you'll find in each location, how to get there, where to stay and where to eat, and who, in his opinion, each location is best suited to. If you've been wondering whether to stay in Interlaken, Grindelwald, Lauterbrunnen, Wengen or Murren, what James shares with us today will help you to choose the base that's best for you. Welcome back to the podcast, James. Thank you very much for joining us today to talk to us about the beautiful Jungfrau region, which you call home. So maybe you could tell everyone listening a bit about yourself, or introduce yourself first, and tell us about your background and how you came to be living in beautiful Wengen.
Good morning, Carolyn. Thanks for having me along, as always. Very kind of you. Great to be here. Yeah, I came to be in the Jungfrau region just under 9 years ago when I moved to Switzerland with my previous job, which was based in Zurich, but I was lucky enough to be able to choose where I lived and then just commute to the office 2 days a week. And I chose Wengen because it was a place that was very close to my heart for previous reasons. And we settled there as a family. And since then, I started up my own company, Swiss TaylorMade, which is how you and I came into contact back in 2021. And I think when you move to the Jungfrau region, whereverabouts in the Jungfrau region that is, you tend to stay. It's such a beautiful place, as you well know. And this is my home now. So very, very proud to call it home as well.
Yeah, I bet. It certainly would be a magnificent place to live, I'm sure. The times I get to visit there on holiday, yeah, I can certainly imagine what living there and waking up to those views every day would be like.
Yeah, it's amazing. And, you know, you never take them for granted either. That's the other thing. I see the Jungfrau every day of the week, all several times a day, and you never tire of looking at it.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the questions that I hear very frequently, I get emails about this all the time, and it's a topic that comes up very often in my Facebook group, the Switzerland Travel Planning group, is where should I stay in the Jungfrau region? Where do I base myself? There's 5 sort of main towns, and I think people are often confused about what the differences are. You know, does one give them better access to the various mountain excursions, etc.? So the reason I invited you on today is for you to share all your local knowledge, and we can go through those 5 different towns and villages, and hopefully at the end of this episode give people some, clarity on what base is best for them. So let's start with the biggest town and probably the hub for the whole region, which is Interlaken.
I mean, in response to your question, Carolyn, it's a very difficult question to answer because it's such a great region. And also because one perhaps myth, which I can help to clarify, is that even though there are, as you say, 5 different villages or 5 main towns within the Jungfrau region, they are actually very close to one another. Switzerland is actually a very small country, so getting between each of the five is actually very easy because of the great transport system we have here. So as I'll go through some of the questions and the five different towns, will also maybe become apparent is how well they are all linked anyway with the trains and the cable cars and gondolas. So that may also help people realise that actually they're all good.
Yeah, very, very good point. They are all, as you say, very well connected, and you can't really choose a bad option, let's be honest. I mean, wherever you choose to stay, the magnificent attractions of the Jungfrau region are right on your doorstep anyway. But as I said, we will start with Interlaken. Perhaps you can give us a bit of an idea for those folks that are listening who haven't been to Switzerland before or haven't been to the region. Whereabouts is Interlaken, and what are some of the things that we should know about it?
Okay, well, Interlaken's in a wider region called the Berner Oberland. It lies between two lakes, Lake Brienz and Lake Thun, both really beautiful lakes. Both have lake cruises available to enjoy across each of them. I think the altitude of Interlaken is around about 700-800 meters above sea level. And that really is, I suppose, the gateway to the Jungfrau region. That's, I suppose, the best way to describe it. It's an hour south of Bern on the train, not directly south, but in a southerly direction. So half-hourly services from Bern. Most people are coming from that direction in order to get to the Jungfrau region. The best way to get here, of course, is by train, but you can also drive. Another way of reaching Interlaken is over the Brunig line. If guests are here on holiday and joining the scenic rail journeys, you have the Lucerne-Interlaken Express, which is also a 2-hour journey from Lucerne, again in a southerly direction, and an absolutely fantastic way to arrive in Interlaken. The town itself, I think population is around about 6,000 in central Interlaken itself and about 20,000 in the wider area. So it's quite heavily populated as far as the Jungfrau region is concerned. But for most international travellers, even though we consider Interlaken to be very busy and lots going on, it's actually a very quiet and quaint place most of the time as well. So, and there's all sorts to do down there. I think when it comes to restaurants, for example, you are spoilt for choice. There's a lot of hotels down there as well. So regardless of the budget that people may have, there is accommodation for everybody. A couple of recommendations, the Hotel Metropole, which right in the centre of town, you can't ever lose yourself if you're staying at the Metropole. It's the first thing you see from anywhere in the village. And the view from the top of the Metropole is absolutely sensational. Food up there is great also, and a very lively bar. And the Hotel Interlaken, which is closer towards Interlaken Oststation, is a really nice 4-star hotel, family-owned and run. And perhaps a surprise tip would be, both in terms of the standard of accommodation, but also the food on offer, is the youth hostel right next to Interlaken Oststation. Again, if you're on a budget and you're maybe pushed for time also, grabbing something to eat at the youth hostel, if you're about to go elsewhere in the Jungfrau region or you're heading back towards Bern or Lucerne, the youth hostel is a fantastic place to go and have some lunch. It's brilliantly located and the food is excellent. And that's actually where a lot of the locals go for their lunch too.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that because I've actually eaten there a couple of times. And sometimes, when I'm heading to the station, if I'm a bit early, I'll just stop in there and have a coffee. There's some beautiful tables and chairs that you can sit out on the footpath or the pavement for our North American listeners. So it's a really nice atmosphere. And as you say, right next door to the train station.
Yeah, it's a great place, and it's just down by Interlaken. There's lots going on there as well. I think the point about Interlaken, certainly, if you were trying to decide which of the 5 towns we've mentioned, why would you stay in Interlaken? I suppose my advice would be to stay in Interlaken if you're someone who is trying to see as much of the region as possible in the shortest amount of time. Gives you access to everywhere else within Switzerland, but also within the Jungfrau region, it is the place to go if you do want to rush around, let's say, and see as much as you can in maybe just a couple of days.
Now, there are 2 railway stations in Interlaken, aren't there? Interlaken Ost and Interlaken West. So what should visitors need to know about those 2 different stations?
Well, the 2 different stations are either end of town. So when you're coming in from the Bern direction and you're staying towards Interlaken West, you get off at Interlaken West. It's arguably closer to all the shops and the main restaurants, I suppose. And it's also closest to a town on the other side of the river, Unterseen, which is a kind of unknown gem, I suppose. If you're visiting Interlaken, you should also go to Unterseen. Even though it's a separate town completely by name, It's just a 5-minute walk from Interlaken West Station, and it's beautiful. If you were to walk from Interlaken West to Interlaken Ost, you're literally going through the centre of Interlaken. And that's actually a really nice walk to do. Perhaps get off at West. If you're connecting with the train that's leaving from Ost, jump off at West and have a walk through town. If you've not got too much to carry, or you're travelling without luggage that day, that's a really good route to take in order to see what you need to see in Interlaken. Ost station's at the other end of town, a bit further out of the main hub of the town, but again, only a short walk, and it's all along the flat as well. That's probably a good point to make. Interlaken West to Interlaken Ost, or vice versa, as a walk, it's perfectly flat, so anybody can do that. Especially on a nice day, it's great to walk through town and see all the paragliders landing in the middle of town, for example, as they do. Again, going back to Ost Station, once you're at Ost Station, that then gives you access to the Jungfrau region. So any onward journey to Wengen, Lauterbrunnen, Grindelwald, you would do that taking a train from Interlaken Ost rather than West.
And it being Switzerland, of course, those two stations are also connected by very frequent bus services as well. So if someone does arrive at one station and need to get to the other station and they don't want to walk, they can catch a bus, of course. So always convenient in Switzerland. So what are some of the highlights or the main attractions of Interlaken?
Well, the village itself, as I've said, is full of things to do. So if you want to go shopping, you want to find some really great restaurants, that you have everything you need there. And one of the really good excursions from Interlaken is the Harderkulm excursion. Now, that's, I suppose, the local mountain. Just a short ride by funicular from just outside Interlaken Ost station is the ride up to Harderkulm, from where you have, certainly on a clear day when the weather's good, you have an absolutely incredible view across both of the lakes, and then directly heading south you have the famous trio of mountains, the Eigermunk and the Jungfrau. Harderkulm is, I suppose, if you had one quick excursion to do in a morning or an afternoon whilst you're in Interlaken, that's the one you would do, no question. The view from up there is absolutely spectacular. I'd also recommend, I did mention previously that it sits between two lakes, so you have regular boat trips, especially from the spring onwards, on both lakes, Lake Brienz and Lake Thun. I suppose, again, if people are pushed for time and they wanted to do a lake cruise, but they would only want to do one of them, then I would probably say Lake Brienz just has the edge over Lake Thun as far as it being, I think it's slightly more beautiful. They're both absolutely stunning, but I would say if you were only doing one, do Lake Brienz. That would be my recommendation. And then other than that, of course, when it comes to excursions, if you are based in Interlaken, then we can then go into the rest of the Jungfrau region. So that would be one of your other excursions. You would then travel from Interlaken as your base, heading up the Lauterbrunnen Valley or down towards Grindelwald. And from there, as you know, you have access to all the other stuff, which we'll go on to, I'm sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so that's a pretty good overview of Interlaken. There's plenty of shops, plenty of restaurants, and plenty of accommodation options there. So if someone is, as you said, they want to try and see as much of the region as they can in a very short space of time, Interlaken is a great base. What about the next largest town in the region, Grindelwald?
Well, yeah, that's the next largest town, and it's slightly higher up again, using the Eiger Express. That's probably what most people going to Grindelwald are going to do at some point. They may be there for a week, they may just be there for a day. But a lot of people, if they're not doing the hiking, they're going to go there and see the Jungfrau Joch. My tip, I suppose, choose Grindelwald as your base. If you were on you're short of time, you would definitely probably stay in Grindelwald if you were just in the region to see the Jungfrau Joch, because you can get up there so quickly now using the new gondolas, the Eiger Express from Grindelwald Terminal. That would be my hot tip.
Okay, and what about perhaps lesser known things to see or do around Grindelwald? Do you have any tips there?
Well, I think there's some really great hikes, actually. And what you do find with Grindelwald is, certainly in the summer months, the village, because of the access to the Jungfrau Joch, the village gets really, really busy. So take yourself up to Pfingsteg, for example, which is, I suppose, a lesser-known excursion. From there, you have some absolutely amazing hikes, and most of which are doable for the majority of people as well. I mean, Carolyn, whilst everything looks really steep and everything, may seem to be quite a technical hike for a lot of people, actually a lot more of the mountain is more accessible than you think, as long as you're sensible with your footwear and you're of relatively good fitness. One great tip for a short but very enjoyable hike: take the cable car up to Pfingsteg and then walk to the hut at Bearegg for a late morning breakfast. It's a strenuous hike towards the end for a few people, but the view of the glacier once you get there is extremely rewarding, and you can actually do that excursion with the cable car included easily within the space of a morning or an afternoon. So that would be my tip. Go up to Pfingsteg, and if you're not up for the hike, you're at least then above the village. The view from the cable car is spectacular, and you're also perhaps avoiding some of the crowds which we do get in the high season summer months.
Okay, that's a great tip. Now, I was lucky enough to stay in Grindelwald recently, just in January. So I've got a couple of accommodation recommendations and a couple of restaurant recommendations as well, but then I'll ask you for yours. So for me, I stayed in the beautiful 4-star Superior Glacier Hotel and Restaurant, which was just absolutely beautiful, and it has a lovely wellness centre there. Magnificent view from the balcony looking straight out over the Eiger, so that was amazing. And we also stayed, so we came back to Grindelwald twice actually, and on the first visit we stayed at some lovely apartments called Chalet Carve, and this is a family-owned building that has 3 separate 2-bedroom apartments. Again, magnificent views. So they're definite recommendations from me. What about you? Have you got any places there that you particularly like?
Yeah, I have 2 on my list, and luckily they don't match yours. That's not a bad thing. It just gives our listeners more choice. But the first one I would recommend, again, it's family run. I think that's always very important if you can find somewhere family run. The Kreuzenpost, which is a 4-star family run hotel directly opposite the main station in Grindelwald. Not only is the hotel great and the location is perfect, of course, but the owner family and the son, Benny, he also runs the kitchen. He's the head chef as well. And his food is sensational. So really warm family welcome, plus family cooked food in their restaurant. Perfect location within the village. That would be my first tip. And then the other one, which I also really enjoy, again, perfectly located by the train station, is the 5-star Schweizerhof. That's a lovely hotel. You literally fall off the train and you're there. Great food, great accommodation. And as with pretty much, I mean, I can't think of anywhere in Grindelwald that doesn't have an amazing view. That's probably another thing that people may ask you, Carolyn. You know, where's the best place to stay in Grindelwald with the best view? I think probably that's an impossible question to ask, because absolutely everywhere has a good one.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, some great tips there for dining as well. The Glacier Hotel and Restaurant, yeah, the food there was magnificent. And we also had a really lovely lunch at Barry's Restaurant, which is at the Eiger Selfness Hotel. They had like a meal of the day, 2 courses and a drink, and I think it was something like, 20 franc or something. It was, yeah, excellent food. So that's a great option. And the Hotel Central Walter, also quite near the station, had, yeah, some delicious meal there as well. So that's Grindelwald. Any other tips about visiting Grindelwald?
Well, again, it's so difficult to kind of summarize what there is to do there, because you have cable cars from Grindelwald, you have the trains, you have the post buses, which go up the mountain as well. I suppose what you can also mention for Grindelwald, as well as access to the Jungfrau yacht, the V-Bahn, which the new Eiger Express is part of, the right-hand gondola in the whole V-Bahn project also takes you up to Mannlichen, which is the ridge between Wengen and Grindelwald. So we talked earlier about the train from Interlaken to Grindelwald. Well, actually, you can still access Grindelwald from Wengen, for example. And that Mannlichen's a great excursion. Most of the traffic is going up to the Jungfrau yacht on the Eiger Express, but if you jump on the other gondola and just fancy a really nice view, again, with an amazing view of Eigermunk and Jungfrau with a nice restaurant at the top, which is where you and I met the last time you were over here, that's a really nice excursion too. Less people, less crowded, but the views are spectacular.
Yeah, they absolutely are. Okay, so now we're going to talk about, well, for years and years, it's been my favourite village, my favourite place in Switzerland, Lauterbrunnen, because I first visited here on my first trip to Switzerland, which was, yeah, I'm showing my age now, but probably about 35 years ago. And as soon as I entered the village, I was like, wow, I was just blown away by the beauty, and that's just kept drawing me back time and time again. So on most trips to Switzerland, I stay at Lauterbrunnen, and the winter trip was the exception when I stayed in Grindelwald, which I absolutely loved. But Lauterbrunnen, it's drawing me back again. I think next time I might be back there. So I'll let you give the listeners a bit of an overview of Lauterbrunnen.
Well, yeah, it's one of those places where most people perhaps will have seen photos of it before they arrive. But when you're off the train with waterfall background this time and the cliffs and the valley stretching out into the distance, it really does take your breath away. I mean, I can't think of a more beautiful valley in the whole world than the Lauterbrunnen Valley. It blows you away. Location-wise, it's, again, just a 20-minute or so train ride from Interlaken Ost, direct train, and then you're off the train, and then you are in the village. It's a long high street, the far end of which, from the station, you find the famous Staubach Falls. And that's the first thing you need to do when you get to Lauterbrunnen. Off the train, walk down the high street, which, as you know, in itself is beautiful. It's extremely quaint. It's probably not changed at all, really, since you had your first ever trip there. And that's, I think, where its charm lies. It will always look like it does now. But once you get to the end of the village and you start to see the waterfalls, they are as impressive as you think they're going to be. Once you get there, you can actually take a walk right up into the cliff face itself and walk behind where the water is flowing. And it's so impressive. I think the village itself, whilst you're drawn to the waterfalls, take time to walk through the village. There are loads of quaint little bakeries, cafes, restaurants, hotels down there. It's just a beautiful place. It can get very busy in the summer for obvious reasons. So if you're going to spend time in Lauterbrunnen, and you have to do that, and you're going to go and need to stand by the waterfalls, try and go as early as you possibly can. Certainly if you're visiting in let's say, end of June, July, August, early September, it's busy during the day. And in the afternoon, it can be very, very busy. So go first thing. And that's going to give you the best experience of the waterfalls and the village before the crowds arrive later in the day. But you can't come to the Jungfrau region and not spend some time down there, because it is as stunning as you think it's going to be. In fact, it's much more stunning than you can ever imagine.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think perhaps that's probably one of the reasons why I enjoy staying in Lauterbrunnen so much, because in the late afternoon, all those day trippers disappear. They go back to Interlaken or Bern or Zurich or wherever. And then the village is like, it's not empty, but there's hardly any people there. And every night we tend to just go for a bit of a stroll around alongside the river. There's a beautiful walking trail. I think it's called the Panorama Weg. And it's just so tranquil walking around there in the evening when all the day trippers have left. So that's one of the things I love about Lauterbrunnen. There's not a lot of hotels in the village. I mean, it's quite small. And a lot of the hotel, as you said, nothing much has changed for a very long time. So there's no big new modern fancy hotels in Lauterbrunnen. But do you have any recommendations where you would suggest people stay if they're looking for a hotel?
There's the Hotel Silberhorn, which is just set back from the station, actually behind the cable car station, which takes you up to Grutschalp, which we'll come on to. But I think that's when people talk about Lauterbrunnen and they're staying in a hotel, that tends to be people's recommendation. As you say, there's not many hotels, so there aren't that many to choose from. But another tip would be, if certainly again for those who are on a bit of a tighter budget, there's some great campsites down in Lauterbrunnen. And again, location-wise, for a campsite, you couldn't find a more beautiful campsite if you tried. So there is, again, something for everybody. Hotel Silberhorn is closer to the station, and at the far end of the village towards the falls, you have the campsite. So there is plenty of choice down there. One thing I would recommend people do, those certainly looking to stay and base themselves overnight in Lauterbrunnen, book early. For the summer months, it does get booked very, very quickly. So if you are coming this coming summer, I'd certainly book your accommodation now if you haven't done already, because it does get very busy down there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can attest to that because we're recording this late March and I've just booked something for October and it was quite difficult to find something. So yes, booking early is a very good idea. I did want to just mention something too about the camping grounds that you mentioned. I stayed in the camping Jungfrau quite a few times when we used to travel when our children were small and accompanying us on trips. We stayed at the camping ground often and it was wonderful, perfect location, great view, as you said. And the restaurant there is amazing. Restaurant Weidstüble, I think it's called. magnificent food. But again, if you're visiting in summer, definitely make a reservation because it does book out very quickly.
It does. Yeah, we don't want to. I don't want to put people off, but yeah, as you say, Carolyn, it's the summer months. It's becoming extremely popular. Whether it's a lunchtime reservation or a hotel reservation, get yourself booked in early, and so then you're avoiding disappointment.
Mm-hmm. What sort of traveller would you recommend to stay at Lauterbrunnen?
It's a good question because Lauterbrunnen, even though it's separate from the other villages, it's so close to both Murren and Wengen anyway. I would say those who were travelling on a stricter budget would probably choose Lauterbrunnen. I think you do have the more extensive range of the camping accommodation, and the hotels in Lauterbrunnen itself are very reasonably priced, assuming you get in early enough. So because of its location, we're directly between Wengen and Murren. If Wengen and Murren were two highlights that you wanted to explore whilst you were on your trip to Switzerland, then Lauterbrunnen would be a good choice because it's directly in the middle of the two. And as we've said, it's such a nice place, especially when the crowds have gone late in the afternoon. It's almost like you have the place to yourself.
Yeah, definitely. And I've also got some recommendations for apartments in Lauterbrunnen. They don't actually have names because they're all privately owned, but I'll put the links to them in the show notes for this episode. Right, so now it's time to move on to your hometown, Wengen. So please tell us why we should be staying at Wengen when we come to the Jungfrau region.
Well, this is the hardest one to talk about for obvious reasons. It's a beautiful village. The views are incredible. It's just a nice place to spend time, whether you're on holiday or whether you live here. It's just a great place. How do we get here? Well, I think one of the advantages of Wengen is when you arrive in Wengen, you've actually experienced a scenic rail journey of only 10 minutes, which also blows your mind because it's a very steep climb up the left-hand side of the valley as you're looking south from Lauterbrunnen. It winds its way up to the plateau on which Wengen sits at an altitude of 1,250 metres. And the view down the Lauterbrunnen valley from that train is sensational. So as a tip from Lauterbrunnen, just going back a step there, if anybody just wants a quick trip from Lauterbrunnen, is just get the train ride up to Wengen, because as you know, the journey itself is absolutely spectacular. And when you come out of the tunnel at the other end, there you are in Wengen, looking down the valley, and you have the Jungfrau looming over you. It's a spectacular setting, and it's traffic-free. So of the two villages that we have in the region, Wengen and Murren, they're both traffic-free. That doesn't actually mean that there are no cars or no electric buggies. It just means you cannot access either of those villages by using your own car. So when you get to Wengen, you have to travel by public transport. What that means, of course, is once you're there, the streets are traffic-free with the exception of the odd tractor or the odd hotel buggy taking luggage to the hotel. But from a family perspective, when you know you can jump off the train and the kids can run around in the street without having to worry about the oncoming traffic, that in itself, along with Murren, is perhaps what sets those two villages apart. Accommodation-wise in Wengen, we've just had the opening of its first 5-star hotel, so we now have everything between the budget accommodation and the 5-star category. So there's definitely something for everyone up in Wengen. There's a wide choice of restaurants, and the hotels now also have very good restaurants themselves. I think in the region itself, not just Wengen, but Murren, Grindelwald, the hotels are really now upping their game. So there is a higher standard of accommodation across the region, and there's always something as well for those who perhaps are looking for something slightly cheaper. Wengen is currently renovating at least 3 hotels, and that's a good thing. When hotels renovate, the neighbouring hotels tend to also up their game as well. So the quality is really, really getting higher at the moment. What to do from Wengen? I mentioned the Mannlichen excursion, which is the cable car Wengen up to Mannlichen, the ridge between Grindelwald and Wengen. And of course, you have the slower but arguably more scenic route up to the Jungfrau Joch, the train from Wengen to Kleine Scheidegg, from where you then catch the onward connecting train up to Eiche and then the final stage up to the Jungfrau Joch. I suppose listeners who haven't been to Wengen before may have heard it not because of its summer activities, but because of the fact that it hosts the world's longest World Cup downhill race mid-January. That's actually what brought me to Wengen. I remember seeing it on a TV program called Ski Sunday back when I was a kid, and it was this magical, mysterious world up in the mountains somewhere where these people came down the mountain as fast as they possibly could, and it stuck with me, and that's actually what brought me here in the first place. So ski racing heritage, but it's now rapidly becoming a very, very popular summer destination. As you and I know, there's limitless hiking, but I think that's fair to say for the entire region. If you want to come hiking, and that's the main reason for your holiday, it actually doesn't matter where you stay. This region is renowned for its hiking, and I've lived here 9 years and still haven't done all the hiking. That tells you how much there is to do, because I hike a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. So what can people expect in terms of services? Like, is there a grocery store there, and can they get most of the supplies that they need? And then also perhaps you can maybe give us a couple of personal recommendations for accommodation.
Sure. There's everything you need up here. It is a tiny little village. A lot of people do think that because we're cut off by just a train ride up here, we can't find what we need in the shops. Well, there are 2 supermarkets, one larger Co-op, the station, and then in the centre of the village, just about 200 metres away, is the Dorflader, which is a family-owned smaller supermarket but specialises in local produce. So we have a lot of cheese up in the Alps, and the local farmers who produce cheese, they all sell their local cheese through the Dorflader. So if you wanted to try the local stuff and buy some of the local cheese, whether it be for your picnic or to get it vacuum packed and take it home with you or take it onto your next destination, then the Dorflader's the shop I would recommend. Hotel recommendation, I'd say probably there's a lot of choice and a lot of variety amongst them, but I'd say the best view, the quaintest hotel, the family-run hotel is the Hotel Falcon. That's definitely the one I would recommend. 3-star Swiss historic hotel. You literally are walking back in time as soon as you walk in there. But if you've not stayed there yourself, Carolyn, the view from the terrace and all the south-facing rooms is directly towards the Jungfrau. It's fantastic. Plus, it's family run, so it has that very warm welcome that you would expect. And then, as I mentioned earlier, you have now a 5-star hotel up on the top end of town and renovated 4 stars, recently renovated. And there is a lot to choose from. The Hotel Schöneck on the High Street is a really nice little 3-star hotel, perfect location. But if I was only choosing one, I'd say I'd certainly go for the Hotel Falcon.
Okay. Great. I have actually had dinner a couple of times at the Hotel Schöneck out on the beautiful terrace, looking straight at the mountains. And yes, it's wonderful. So definitely, I haven't stayed in Wengen, but I have enjoyed a couple of meals there for sure.
Well, next time you're over, you're staying in Wengen, Carol.
Okay. I've got no choice, have I?
No.
Right. So there's one more village that we're going to talk about, also car-free, and this is Murren. So maybe you could give us a bit of a rundown about Murren.
Yeah, it's all, as we say, also traffic free and accessible from Lauterbrunnen in 2 ways. When you arrive in Lauterbrunnen, you can jump off the train and then catch the cable car up to Grutschalp, which only takes 5 minutes. And then from Grutschalp, take the train then along not the edge of the cliff, but pretty high up along the cliff towards Murren. Or you can jump off the train in Lauterbrunnen and then catch the post bus to Stechelberg, which is at the top end of the valley, or at least getting towards the top end of the valley. Get off the bus there, and then you connect with what's now the world's steepest cable car from Stechelberg up towards Murren. And just before I talk about Murren itself, one top tip, again, I would recommend if you want to just take your time, instead of just jumping on the gondolas and the trains, when you catch the cable car from Lauterbrunnen to Grutschalp, instead of then jumping straight on the train to take you to Murren, just walk. It will take you a couple of hours, but the walk from Grutschalp to Murren is more or less, again, on the flat, so pretty accessible to more or less everybody. But the entire length of the walk, you have a view which just blows your mind. And if the weather's nice, that would be a great thing to do. Don't jump on the train, do the walk and walk to Murren, because you'll be rewarded. The view's absolutely amazing. Regardless of which direction you've taken up to Murren, I suppose one of the things I would say about Murren is that of all the villages, I suppose it's the most quaint. It's absolutely beautiful. It's the smallest of the villages, but there's something about it. There's something about the way it's laid out. There's something about the cafes and the restaurants that you have along the street in Murren that makes it extremely special. I don't really know which one I would recommend for a restaurant or a hotel because there's so much great choice. The recently renovated Palace Hotel is for those who want the luxury element or the the family-run 4-star Eiger directly opposite the station. They're both great hotels. Also, you have the Blumenthal and the Alpenruhe, which are owned by the Schilthorn Cableway. I suppose they're the 4 hotels in Murren that I would strongly recommend. That leads me on, of course, to the Schilthorn, the setting for the Bond movie on Her Majesty's Secret Service, currently undergoing major renovation work to its cable cars. But I suppose if there was not only one excursion, impossible to choose which is the best excursion, but I would say of the big name excursions in the region, the view from the Schilthorn is probably the one you would do. And I know I'm upsetting a lot of people there, but I think, if there was one view to do, one place to go for the view, the Schilthorn is the one I think in the region that you would certainly favour. It's just, I can't even describe. It's so good. And it's 360 degrees. It's uninterrupted. It's jaw-dropping. It's sensational. Coupled with the new cable cars, plus the revolving restaurant up there, and the fact that it's where they filmed the Bond movie, that's a really great day out.
Yeah, absolutely. And we had Alan from the Schilthorn on a couple of episodes ago talking about that brand new opening of the world's steepest cableway. So regular listeners have probably heard him talk about that, but I have to agree, they call the view from up there the Swiss skyline, and it really is just, if you get a clear day and you see all those mountains, it's just absolutely magnificent.
Yeah, it really is. You have to do it. I mean, you have to do all of them. So many different things to do in the region. I think, again, if you're here long enough, do them all. That's the other thing. Don't just do one and do them all, whether it be the Jungfrau Joch, the Schilthorn, or the Mannlichen. Just going back to Wengen, the cable car up from Mannlichen with the balcony on the top. That's an experience which you can only find in one other place, and that's well worth doing. It's just, when you asked me the questions, Carolyn, prior to our interview, I knew they were going to be very difficult to answer. Giving people the right things to do around here is not easy at all.
No, it definitely isn't. So just to perhaps put you on the spot even more or make it even more difficult for you, what tips would you give to people who are trying to choose the right base for their stay in the Jungfrau region?
Well, something which I know you're very much an expert on is what passes and train tickets to buy, because some of the listeners may know that there's a lot of different choices when it comes to train passes over here. You have the Jungfrau Travel Pass, you have the Berner Oberland Pass, and you have the Swiss Travel Pass, all of which give access to the area, but some of them have certain restrictions in certain places. If you are here for, let's say, just a couple of days, maybe just 2 nights, and needed a base to see as much as possible, then I would certainly say Interlaken is probably the best, most practical choice. It just gives you more options as far as the transport is concerned, but also if you were unlucky enough to come when the weather was poor, there's probably more to keep you occupied down there, and not only in town, but a short ride away, than there is higher up in the mountains. If you're here for, I would say, any longer than 2 or 3 nights, then come up to Murren, Wengen, or Grindelwald. And certainly, if I was going to say which of those 3 would I choose if I wanted to do the excursions and do all the hiking, then you're narrowing it down to Wengen or Murren. Then if I was to give you my number 1 pick, of course, I'd be going to say, because it's right in the middle, then you're going to have to stay in Wengen.
That makes sense. That's very good. Right. So thank you for sharing all that information with us. If our listeners would like to know more about you or what you do through Swiss TaylorMade, how can they get in touch with you?
They can, with pleasure, send me an email, james@swisstailormade.com. And I'd be delighted to give your listeners and subscribers any tips that they need on what to see and do whilst they're in the region. It would be a pleasure.
Thank you very much, James. It's been great chatting to you again.
Thank you, Caroline. A pleasure as always.
Are you a bit clearer now on where you'll base yourself when you visit the Jungfrau region? You really can't choose the wrong base, as each of the towns and villages are so well connected by public transport. But I find that knowing what to expect in each of the different locations can make a huge difference when you're choosing the base that's right for you. I'd love to hear which town or village you decide to stay in. Why not send me a voice message to let me know? You'll find a link to record your message in the description of this episode on your podcast player. If you missed the names of the accommodation and restaurants that James and I mentioned, you'll find them all in the show notes for this episode, as well as a link to episode 101, where James gave a great insight into the best things to do in Grindelwald. That one's definitely worth a listen. I hope this episode has helped you to choose your base in the Jungfrau region. But if you need any more help finalising your Switzerland itinerary, or you'd like some assistance with planning and booking your trip, Holidays to Switzerland can help. I've partnered with some of Switzerland's most reputable travel companies who can help take the hassle out of your trip planning. I personally know the folks who run these companies and highly recommend them. Not only do they offer fantastic Swiss vacation products to suit every traveller, they also give the Holidays to Switzerland audience a 5% discount. You can find out more and get the promo code to take advantage of the discount offer at holidaystoswitzerland.com. I'll include the link in the show notes with all those other links and the names of all those accommodation places and restaurants at holidaystoswitzerland.com/podcast. Thank you so much for joining me today. If you've enjoyed the episode, please consider sharing it with your family, friends and colleagues who are planning a trip to Switzerland. And if you enjoy the show, I'd be super grateful if you could leave a 5-star rating or review wherever you listen to podcasts. Thanks so much. Until next week, tschüss!
She lived with you guys for 2 years, and you never heard from her again after that.
Please don't text me or call me again.
She'd finished her art history degree and was researching a Swiss painter, Ursula Blum.
He's standing by a tree, looking right at me.
Emma!
Music is 100% abstract.
Ursula walked up to her and whispered a song in her ear, and the girl recovered her ability to speak.
Sometimes mythology merges with reality.
What's going on here?
Bloom is out now. Find out why this audio thriller is taking the podcast world by storm. Available on your favorite platform. That's BLUM